let's jump into today's topic. So today is kind of like a mini crash course. This book here, this is the Principles, Real Estate Principles book. It is approximately or exactly 520 pages. So good luck reading 520 pages. You'll fall asleep on page 2. If we were to take this entire book, and if I were to condense this book into an hour and a half, like topic and discussion, there's 8 subjects, 8 topics that we would summarize this book into. We would call these the need to knows, the must knows. Like I could almost guarantee you 98% that the content that we discuss here this morning, the concepts, the vocabulary that we discuss here this morning will be on your state exam. It's just proven. I've asked a ton of students about this, and they're going to be on your state exam. So that's what we're going to go over here this morning. We're going to go over a few key concepts. We're going to talk classes of property. We're going to talk about freehold and less than freehold estates. We're going to use some fancy vocabulary, which is just freehold means own and less than freehold basically means renting. We're going to talk about financing instruments. We're going to talk about us as agents and our fiduciary duties, like things that we need to do when representing others. We're going to discuss value, because value and real estate go hand in hand. We're going to then put on our appraiser hats. We're appraisers. We're going to put our real estate attorney hats too and talk about fair housing laws. And then we're going to talk about encumbrances, fancy real estate legal mumbo jumbo that is very pertinent to real estate. So let's dive in and let's get started. Let's talk about classes of properties. And this is an important one. And what we're talking about in classes of properties, we're talking about personal property. We're talking about fixtures. We're talking about real property. This is the product that we sell. This is very relevant to selling real estate. This is very relevant to being a real estate agent. It's relevant to being a commercial agent. It's relevant to representing a landlord or renting out properties. This is relevant across the board. So let's talk personal property first. Personal property definition is personal property is anything that is movable and cannot be classified under the definition of real property. Let's look around our rooms right now. Let's look around the rooms. What is one thing that you would deem as personal property? Look around your rooms, throw it in the chat, shout it out. Like, what's personal property in wherever you're sitting right now? I like it, especially on Zoom. The iPad, the jewelry, the phone. Yeah, that's all personal property. It's not attached to your property. Your living room, your desk, your computer. I'm assuming MC says living room furniture, my computer monitors, my desk. Yes, these are all things that are personal property. If you were to move today, like what would you be taking with you? Well, that is personal property. Easy one. If you're selling your house, you're going to take all your furniture, right? Easy. Let's talk about a fixture. What is a fixture? Now, the term fixture is personal property attached to or incorporated into the land such a manner as to become real property. Let me give you an easy example of a fixture. You know, you go to Home Depot and, you know, there's a lemon tree there. Like that lemon tree is personal property. You bought it. You bought it at Home Depot. You put it in the back of the car. You got a little bit of soil in your back seat. You're like, oh, I got to clean that later. You put it to your backyard and it is still personal property. But once you dig a hole and throw that lemon tree into the ground, it has now become real property. It has now become known as a fixture because it is incorporated into the land. So you go to Home Depot later on today, you get a new faucet. That faucet isn't is still personal property. If it's still in the box and haven't put it in yet, it's still personal property. But then you put that bathroom fixture into your faucet, it has now become real property because it's affixed to it. It's attached to it. It was a piece of personal property that became real property. And that's what the definition of a fixture is. Now, this can get a little bit confusing because it's like Fixture. What else? How do I know if it's really a fixture? How do I know if it's deemed real property or if it's attached to it? Well, anytime that you guys are taking your exams, especially for real estate, if there's an acronym involved, it's important. If there is an acronym involved, everybody, it is important. So how do you determine if something is a fixture? Easy. Just use the Maria method. How do I not have a Maria in this group? Man, just use Maria's method. And MARIA. And what the Maria method is 5 tests or questions that you either ask yourself to determine if something is a quote unquote a fixture. So let's go through the Maria method. The M stands for the method of attachment. So whatever is in question here, whatever personal property / fixture that we're discussing here, we have to ask ourselves, like, how is it attached to the property? Is it glued? Is there nails? Is it nailed to the property? Are there screws attached to it? Is it movable? Is it plug-in? Envision a backyard. Envision you're in your backyard, right? And there's a kid's play set. That thing's like a couple £100, right? That thing's not easy to move. It takes hours to put together. Absolutely hate those things. Would you guys consider that play set a real property or personal property? What's your guess?
You said it's not attached, right?
Yeah, but it's like
Personal
400
property.
pounds.
Personal property.
Personal property.
Bella says personal. Jessica says personal. Does anyone guess real property? All right, everyone's personal. Yes, it is personal property because it's just sitting on top of the grass. You know, that's all it is. Now, if that same play set is cemented into the ground, if those metal poles and it's like cemented in there, then it's real property. Because what happens is the attachment has changed now. It's attached to the land, it's affixed to the land. That play set, although it may be 400 or 500 pounds, like you could still pick it up and move it. So that's just one way. So we have to ask ourselves, whatever we're looking at, what is the method of attachment? Glued? Is it permanent? Like that's how we're going to determine if something is a fixture or if it's real property. Remember, fixture is personal property. Adaptability. A stands for adaptability. Is the item made specifically for this home? Is it custom built? We're talking like a fridge. Think about a fridge, like a regular slide-in fridge, has the little, 36-inch wide opening. You slide it right in, you plug it in. That's still personal property. But if that fridge is built in with the fancy like cabinets, the faces that looks like the cabinet, it's built in there, that will now be deemed real property because of the method. It was custom made for that specific spot. What about keys? What about those keys? The keys aren't attached to the property, so how could they be real property?
It comes with a house.
Because of the adaptability, because that key, what it's used for is to open that house. So that key, that garage remote, although it is not physically attached to the property, it is attached to the property. That is real property. That comes with a house, like a key. So when an owner sells a property, those keys need to be given over. Those codes to the door, that needs to be given to the new owners as well too. That's all deemed real property. Relationship. What does it mean to the owner? This one is mainly dealing with tenancy and landlords. So imagine you're a tenant, you're renting a place, and you put in like a built-in desk. Now that built-in desk was bolted, it was screwed into the wall. Is that real property? Or is that personal property? Remember, you don't own the property. what does it mean to the owner? The owner of the property doesn't reside there. The tenant does. The tenant's the one who put it in there. You know, Jaime says real property.
Personal.
And this is where it gets confusing because it's like, wait a minute, it's screwed in. See, the relationship here is that the owner is renting out that property to the tenant. The tenant may have put it in there, but technically that's the tenant's property. It is the personal property because it's the tenant's. It is screwed in. It is going to cause a little bit of damage. Michelle asked, what about the security cameras or a ring? So I have to ask one. We have to ask ourselves. I think that's even a better example. I'm going to use that example from here on out. You're a tenant. You installed a Ring door camera. When you move out, you take that Ring door camera because that was yours. Now, if you're the owner of that property and you sell the property with that Ring and you reside there, you own the home, and you have a Ring door camera, technically that stays because it is attached to it. We have to ask the relationship. Who owns that piece of product? Rudy threw in the chat, what about a stove? I think it depends. Did you buy that stove? Do you own that property? Do you rent that property? It's going to depend on that situation. So if it's a tenant who bought a stove and put it into their rental unit, that stove is staying with that tenant. Same thing with the EV charger. If the tenant purchased that, that's theirs. If you own that property, well, and you put an EV charger, then technically that's real property now. See, and this is where it gets confusing because you're like, oh, shoot, like, I thought you said that was real property, but now you're saying it's a tenant. It's because of the relationship. Who owns that item?
If the tenant move out and leave the stove over there and not take it with him, will that become the real property to the house?
It will now become real property of the house, yes.
And 2 years later, he came back. He want to get that stove back.
Too bad, so sad. You lose. You left. It's not your property anymore. You left your personal property on my property, and it's mine now. That's what happens, yeah.
Okay.
Intention. I stands for intention. Method, adaptability, relationship, intention. Was the item intended to be permanent is what we got to ask ourselves. Was that bookshelf intended to be permanent? If so, then yeah, it's probably real property. That IKEA bookcase that I bought, oh, I put it in there, I put the molding. It was meant to be permanent in there. That is a permanent and it is attached. It is considered real property now. And the last A stands for agreement. Is there a written agreement that states the status of the item? What we use in real estate is what we call the residential purchase agreement. And on this residential purchase agreement, it states items to be included and excluded from a transaction. Bathroom mirrors can be excluded. Potted plants can be included. If there is a written agreement that specifies this item, the EV charger, to be removed, like if this written agreement states that specific item to be removed or included, that's going to supersede everything else. What do we need to know? We need to know the acronym, because when you're reading through these questions and you're like, you get a question that says, which method is not a method to determine if an item is a fixture or real property? That's when you're going to have to go, oh, shoot, that's that one method Ben said. Maria, what does the MARIA stand for? That's when you're going to have to know what those ones are. Maria method. Still on the topic of fixtures and real property, if you ever see the word trade fixture, I need the word business to pop into your heads. Trade fixture is like a different kind of trade. Trade equals business, and this is always personal property. Always personal property. And this is the equipment used in the normal course of business. So if it's a grocery store, it's all the shelving. If it's a dentist, it's the dentist chair, and it's that dentist chair. If it's an office building, it's the cubicles, the chairs, the cabinets. Those are always personal property. Trade equals business. Just think of a trade, but you see that word, just put 2 and 2 together. Trade equals business. So what's real property? Real property is land and anything attached to it. It's that dirt. It's what you step on. That is what real property is. It's the land. That is the grass, the trees, anything permanently attached or affixed to the land, those buildings, the house, the fences, the walls, that's all considered real property. Also, anything appurtenant or incidental with the land. So if you have a little tiny river running behind your home, or water rights, you have a little lake in the back that you can use for personal use, or if you got your own beach, like that's all going to be considered real property. And then anything which is immovable by law, roots, vegetation, landscaping. I think I've told a story about my seller who asked me just before closing if she can take a rose bush because her mom planted them. She was so sad about selling her house, so she wanted to take, rose bush. I probably should have said no. And there was like a dozen rose bushes, and she took them all. I thought she was going to take one, but she literally dug them all up, and the buyers were pissed. The buyers were not happy that there was this empty plot of 10 by 10 square feet with no roses. She should not have taken them. They were real property. They also should not have taken the door handles too. The son took the door handle to his room. Like, you should have left that too. That was a nightmare. Don't take door handles, people. Don't let your clients take them. So anything growing into the ground, that's all real property. Land, anything affixed, like walls, fences, stock, water rights, rights to the river, rights to the lake, and then your landscaping, all that's real property. Everything else is personal property. Or a fixture, which is also real property. I know, a lot of vocabulary on that. Don't worry. So let's talk our next topic. Let's talk freehold and less than freehold estates. We're talking leasehold estates. We're talking ownership. We're talking freehold estates. We're talking life estates. Now, our normal language doesn't say, hey, Carla, I'm going to be, I have a place in Anaheim, a 1-bedroom in Anaheim, and I have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Corona available for a leasehold estate this weekend. Stop by and see them if you're interested. I also have a home in Santa Ana that we're offering a freehold estate for. See, like what I just said makes absolutely no sense. Normally, I would just say, I have a 1-bedroom, 1-bath in Anaheim available for rent, for lease. I also have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Corona for a 1-year, available for a 1-year lease. And I have a house in Santa Ana for sale. And that's what these are. A less than freehold estate is basically a lease. It's basically renting. That's what it is. And this is rights to a property for a specified period of time. I want to offer a leasehold estate to a gazillion people today for a place in Anaheim. And that's what, to button that up, a less than freehold estate is basically renting. That's what it is. There are some vocabulary words. Yes, Rudy, throw out your question.
Hey Ben, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question. I used to be a mover, a household mover. I used to move people out of state, and I did a lot of moving. At what I seen a lot of customers do, they would leave the TV wall mounts on the wall and would take off the TV, and they would leave the TV wall mounts because they said that the realtors told them to leave the wall mounts. And I did that a lot. I didn't do that, maybe 3-4 times. No, I did that a lot. What does that mean?
So especially in the way that you phrase the question and mention the realtors, and I'll show you guys why. And this is always comes up. So on my screen here, you guys can see it. I'm going to scroll down. This is our California Residential Purchase Agreement. So I am going to go to a particular section right here. Let me find it for you. I probably could have just told you to, but I am going to pull it up because here it's better. So this section, in section 9C of the purchase agreement. Actually, it's this whole thing. Actually, I don't want to do this anymore. Let me just tell you what it is. So on the way that the purchase agreement reads, a lot of us have TVs mounted on the wall. The contract states that if the owner has TVs on the wall with the brackets, the owner can either, number one, remove the bracket, patch the holes, but do not have to paint it. That is option number one. Option number two, for that bracket is to stay with the property. So in the eyes of the residential purchase agreement, they view that bracket, everybody, as real property because it's like bolted to the wall. They view that as bolted because if they take out that bracket, they have to patch those holes. And most people don't want to do that. Make sense?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true because that's what we used to do. We used to take off the TVs and just leave the bracket on the wall because that belonged to the property. And I thought that was weird, but yeah, I mean, I seen that a lot. I seen that a lot here in California. Yep.
Yeah. So when you guys start selling real estate, if your sellers ask, oh, what about the TVs? Do I have to patch the holes? Easiest, just leave the brackets. Like $25 on Amazon. They're super inexpensive. Saves them so much time from having to patch them. And the people are going to paint anyway. It's probably going to paint anyway. So just let the new owners handle that. For the buyer, can they request those fixtures? Absolutely. They can ask for the furniture. They can ask for it to be removed as well, too. They can ask for the TV to be included also. Yes, as long if there's an agreement that states like they want something and both parties agree, then you're good. Absolutely. Great questions. Great questions. Less than freehold estate. We have one vocabulary that's called estate for years. This is a type of rental. I'm gonna replace the word rental. I'm gonna replace the word leasehold with rental. This is the type of rental in which a tenant has the right to occupy and use a property for a specific fixed period of time, such as a 1-year lease. That is an estate for years. We also have a periodic estate. And this is a type of rental in which the tenant has the right to occupy and use a property for a series of fixed recurring intervals, such as weekly, monthly, or annually. So like a month-to-month lease. Sometimes your Airbnbs were for a week or so. By the way, I had someone call me out like 3 weeks ago. They're like, Ben, an Airbnb is not a periodic estate. I was like, cool, I totally get it. And I agree with you, it's not. But it's also an easy way to memorize. I also will throw out random stuff to help us memorize things that are more common. Periodic estate is an estate for a shorter period of time that is not a year. It is for a month is a better example. An Airbnb is not the right example, but for me, it helps me memorize that a bit better. A periodic estate, short period of time. An estate at will is the key word to this. This is a type of rental in which the tenant has the right to occupy and use the property for an indefinite period of time, as long as the tenant continues to pay rent and comply with the terms of the lease agreement. You know, when I think of an estate at will, I think of my cousin crashing on my couch for way too long. He wasn't paying any rent, and we can cancel anytime. I had to be like, bro, it's I think it's time to move on. And yeah, it was time for him to move on after a period of time. I make myself sound so bad, like I didn't want to help out family, but you guys don't know the whole story of this one. But this is an estate at will. This is like, hey, I'm going to crash on your couch for a period of time, and either party can cancel. The tenant, the person staying there can be like, all right, I'm going to take it off next week. Cool. And this can be also the owner saying, hey, it's time for you to take off. An estate at will, this one's a lot looser. This one's real open. Estate for years is a year lease. Periodic is like a shorter period of time, month to month. And estate at will is anytime. And then we also estate at sufferance. Sufferance should be your key word to this, suffering. And this is a situation where a tenant remains in possession of a property after a lease is expired and refuses to leave. This is a squatter. My cousin would have been a squatter if he refused to leave. or punch them in the face. But this is the tenant who's like, I'm not leaving. He's like Leonardo DiCaprio, not leaving. Never mind. Let's say that. Stated sufferance, key vocabulary words we want to know. So we talked about leasehold. Remember, that's rental. Freehold is ownership. This is the rights to a property for an unlimited amount of time. This is you. This is homeowners. This is you guys owning a property. When you own property, you basically own a bundle of rights to your property. And this is what we want, right? We want to have ownership rights. We want to be able to do what we want and whatever the hell we want to do. And this is a bundle of rights. And these are your bundle of rights. I asked ChatGPT for a cool acronym that had P, C, E, D, and E. Actually, I just realized that I asked it and it gave me the word deceit, but there's no T. So it lied to me. So never mind, forget everything I just said. So the first one is possession. So possession, you as an owner, you have the right to occupy, live, and sleep in your home. Does that sound about right? You're an owner. You have the right to occupy, live, sleep, and you are the legal owner. You can do whatever you want. Possession. You have the right for control. You have the right to change, renovate, have guests. If you own your home and you want to rent it out, you have the right to do that. Of course, HOA can add limits to this, but in ownership terms, like you have the right to control it. You have the right to enjoy peace and quiet in your home. You have the right for disposition. You have the right to sell, transfer, or like I said earlier, rent the property as well too. And then you have the right of exclusion when you have ownership rights. You have the right to exclude others from entering your property. Of course, search warrants will override this. P, C, E, D, E. I think I just typed it wrong. I'll come up with a fancy acronym for this: possession, control, enjoyment, disposition. But this is like what we want, right? Like when it comes to ownership and bundle of rights, all this, I think all this stuff is common sense. This is stuff that we want. Now, when we're talking freehold estates, when we're talking ownership, we're mainly talking about two types of estates. And these are the two vocabulary. There's a fee simple absolute, and there's a fee simple defeasible. Let's talk about absolute first. Absolute is the greatest interest in a parcel of land. It's the most complete form of ownership. If you own a home right now, all of you guys, this is likely what you have. You have a fee simple absolute. You have a freehold estate, which is also a fee simple absolute if you own property. If you do not own property, you have a leasehold estate. Own property, freehold estate, fee simple absolute. Now, your ownership is only limited by some encumbrances, which is the 4 basic government powers. Like you own your property and you have the right to possess it, sell it, control it, but the government still has some powers over your property. You can't just do anything you want on your plot of land. You can't break the law. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to murder you on my land because I own this property, so I can do whatever I want. You can't do that. There is still government rights to the property, and that's PETE. P-E-T-E. This is the acronym. So the first one is police power. And this is the inherent power in a constitutional authority of the government to adopt and enforce regulations and laws to promote public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. This also falls under like zoning laws too. Like you own your land, cool, but you live in a single-story residential neighborhood, you can't build a high-rise in there. They don't allow that. I had a seller, she burnt her trash. Her and her husband burned trash. The neighbors complained about him. They also had like 9 dogs too. The neighbors complained about that too. So the police, the government still has a governing power to enforce the general welfare, the safety of others. So they still have police power. They also have eminent domain. The power of the government has eminent domain. They have the right to the right of the government to take private property. And this can be used for public institutions such as schools, highways, and more. Yeah, the most common examples of eminent domain that I've seen. I live here in Anaheim, off where the 91 and 5 freeways meet. I remember a long, long time ago when they bought out a row of homes along the 5 freeway and they enacted an eminent domain. They widened the freeway. It was a benefit to the community. So they bought out all those houses from all those homeowners, tore down those houses, and expanded the freeway. They did the same thing on Brooker Street between the 91 and the 5 freeway. They took out 2 rows of homes. Took them years to do this. They widened Brooker Street, but they took out 2 rows of homes. Any Yellowstone fans here? We're watching Yellowstone. The government was trying to take the Dutton's land through eminent domain. But eminent domain is the right of the government to take private property. There has to be a good reason for it. T stands for taxation. You already knew this one was coming. You own property? Cool. The government's going to tax you on it. You're going to pay property taxes on that land. And then E stands for escheat. Escheat. And this occurs when property reverts to the state ownership after an individual dies without a will or without heirs. So Carla has no family, no nothing at all. She owns property though. She passes away. I don't know why, Carla. I always have to make you my example of passing away. So sorry. Carla passes away. She has no family, no heirs, no siblings, no nobody. The property sits there vacant for years. Eventually, that property will revert back to the ownership of the state. So these are the four rights, the government rights to land, also government power. So you own property, cool. It's called freehold estate. You have a fee simple absolute. The government has rights to your property, but you also have a bundle of rights such as possession, control, disposition. That's what you have. Let's talk fee simple defeasible. This is when a grantor places a condition on a fee simple estate. So easy way to explain this one, Carla, I'm going to sell you my land. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can only use it for a park. So I'm going to sell you my vacant plot of land. You can only use it for a park. But hey, if you choose to use this land for something else, that property will automatically be mine again. Are you cool with that?
No.
Well, in this case, you're cool with it. Let me give you another example.
Okay.
I'm going to sell you my 1902 historic Victorian home that has all the characteristics. It's a historic home, and like the founding family of Anaheim lived here. It's like a historic landmark in this city. I'm going to sell it to you, but if you change the windows, change the color of the paint, if you do anything on the exterior that takes away from the historic characterness, just made that word up, of the home, it will automatically revert back to me. That's a fee simple defeasible. Is when someone says you can buy my plot, but you have to use it as this, or you can't do this, and it reverts back to the previous owner. That would be fee simple defeasible. That word defeasible should be your trigger. Should be like, oh, that's that rules. It comes back to the previous owner, and that's what that is. Cool. And a life estate. We'll finish up here on a life estate. That's the interest in a real property, which is held for the duration of a life of a designated person. It may be limited by the life or the person holding it or the life of another person. Nice little example here. You got elderly mom and dad. We got son here. Mom and dad want to ensure the home will be passed to their child, but they want to continue living in a home for the rest of their life. They would be known as the life tenant, and the son would be known as the owner. The life tenants, they have the right to possess it, the right to lease the property. They must maintain the property, and they must pay the taxes. I'm renting out a property next door. The guy has a life estate on the property. when we get to this topic in the course, I'll get all the details for that. This one just came up yesterday, but the situation on the example that I just mentioned, the grandma and the family, but the guy who lives there, like once he passes, it's going to automatically transfer to another family member, but he has a life estate, and I'll get all the details, but I'll share with you. But this is just a quick example on my screen here of a life estate. It's giving the right to somebody to possess that property until they pass. That person must, pay the taxes. They must maintain the property. They would be known as the life tenant. And then we got the owner. Let's talk about financing instruments. And these are used within financing. And these are the instruments used to kind of prove ownership, right? So let's imagine you have a borrower. You have a buyer who wants to borrow money to buy a home. And this is 90% of the transactions, 80% of the transactions. This is a large portion. And when you guys are selling real estate with buyers and sellers, your buyers are likely going to need to get a loan. They're going to need to borrow money. So you need to borrow the money from a bank. So before the lender will give the borrower the money, the lender wants the buyer to sign something called a promissory note. The promissory note is the basic instrument used to evidence an obligation or debt. This is like an IOU. This is like, Carla, I'm going to lend you $500,000. Like, I'm just going to shake your hand. I am going to make you sign a piece of paper saying that you willingly know that you borrowed $500,000 from Ben. This gives the details of the loan terms. It proves someone owns a debt. It's a promise to pay. It can be passed from one person to another. Now, the security device, the instrument here, names the property as a security. So Carla, 123 Main Street, I'm going to give you $500,000 to buy that piece of property. Cool? Okay, cool. Perfect. The collateral is named in the promissory note, such as the address. That's the one that is named in that promissory note. Now, that device, the instrument that we were referring to here, everybody, is either the deed or the mortgage. The deed or the mortgage is what we're really talking about here. And now this is where it confuses everybody, because here in California, everybody, we don't use mortgages. I know everyone's brains just exploded because they're like, what are you talking about? I got a mortgage. No, you have a mortgage is the language that we use, because that's what we call the loan that we got from the mortgage company. What we're talking about, though, are pieces of paper. That's what we're really talking about here. In California, we use deeds. We use a deed to prove that somebody owes somebody money or owes ownership on a property. In other states, they use something called a mortgage. And the mortgage is a financial instrument. It secures property for payment of a promissory note. This is rare in California. Let's cancel out the word rare and just say not used in California. So what's the difference between these two? The main difference that you guys should know between a mortgage and a trust deed is when it comes to foreclosure. Let's talk about foreclosure. And if you don't know what foreclosure is, that's you not making your mortgage payments. This is the equivalent of a bank repo of a car. You don't make your car payments and you have a car loan, they're going to repossess your car. If you don't make your house payments, they are going to foreclose on you, which is take back the property. So in other states, these are the parties. The mortgagor, that's the person borrowing the money, and you have the mortgagee, which is the bank. The borrower is going to sign a promissory note, and they're going to sign the mortgage. In this case, the mortgage is a piece of paper. The promissory note, I promise to pay back the bank. The bank is going to hold on to these pieces of paper. That's what they're going to do. They're going to hold on to that piece of paper that says Carla owes me $500,000, and they're going to hold on to this piece of paper that says that Carla has purchased a property from Bella. They're going to hold on to these pieces of paper. Now, if you foreclose, let's say we're in the state of Missouri right now, and I don't even know if Missouri uses mortgage. I'm just using a different state. In the event of foreclosing on a mortgager, it will be expensive, time-consuming judicial foreclosure. This has to go through the court. It's expensive, takes a long time. This type of foreclosure process in which a lender must file a lawsuit, obtain a court order to foreclose on the property. So if the bank, if you're in a state that's using mortgage as a financial instrument, if they wanted to foreclose on the borrower, it's costly, takes a lot of time. They have to file a lawsuit. They have to go through the court process. Here in California, we use trust deeds. We use trust deeds here, and that's a legal document used to secure a loan for the purchase of or improvement of real property. This is, I would take out the word commonly and only used in California. See, this one here has three parties. There's the trustor, that's the borrower. The borrower is going to sign the promissory note that they promised to pay back a loan, and they're going to sign the trust deed. They can sign the ownership paperwork to the property. There's going to be a third party involved in this, which is called the trustee, and that's usually a title company. That is a title company, and the trustee, they are the ones that are going to hold the promissory, the piece of paper that says that you owe money on a property. They're going to hold the deed itself, and this third party title company trustee is going to represent the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the bank. The bank is the one that will loan you the money. The bank is the one that's going to collect your money. So if you see here in this three-party system, this is where you get your money and this is who you make your payments to. But when it comes to the paperwork and the ownership, it's the title company that's holding that paperwork. They are working for the beneficiary. What happens if you don't make your payments to the bank? Do you guys know what the bank's going to do? The bank is going to tell the trustee, hey, trustee,
Sell the house.
start working on the foreclosure process. We want you to begin the foreclosure process. We want you to issue what we call a notice of default. And this starts that foreclosure process. If you do this, if you go to Zillow.com right now and you type in an address, I'm just gonna type in Los Angeles, right? And then if I change this up here at the top and I go, I want all the homes for sale. And I also want they totally changed their systems. What in oh, here it is. Sorry. There it is. So I want to find all the pre-foreclosures in this area. Let's get rid of that. So for example, this property here at 505015, man, that's a bad example too. They're gonna tell me that is the only pre-foreclosure. That can't be possible. Oh, here we go. All right, so here we go. So pre-foreclosure. This one right here, 321 Kingswood Street in San Diego. This one is listed as a pre-foreclosure. Pre-foreclosure is another word for notice of default. The trustee, this person has not made payments. They had not made three payments, and now the trustee has issued what we call a notice of default and started the foreclosure process. Now, if the owner does not catch up on the payments, it's going to go to a notice of trustee sale, which they're going to finalize the foreclosure process. If you guys wanted to go bid on this property, you could. You could go out there, raise a paddle, and you can buy that note as a foreclosure. The reason why California prefers to do this is because it's non-judicial. It doesn't need to go through the court. Which does not involve the court system and can be completed by a third party, such as a trustee. It's less costly for the beneficiary to have a trustee do it. Because when you go buy that property at auction, the beneficiary is going to collect their money and move on with their lives. What do you need to know? I need you to know that the mortgage has two parties. The trustee has three parties. I need you to know trustor is you. The trustee is the title company representing the beneficiary, which is the bank. I need you to know that the mortgagor and the mortgagee are not very common here in California, but other states, likely east of the Mississippi, are the ones who use this. Trust deed and mortgages, financial instruments. Let's talk about you guys. You guys are going to be working for buyers and sellers, tenants and landlords. You guys are going to be representing others. And when you represent others, you want a commission, correct? Or are you guys doing this for free? No, we're not doing this for free. We are representing others, and we have certain duties that we owe principals, that we owe others. And what a fiduciary is a person or an organization that acts on behalf of another person, putting their client's interests ahead of their own. Real estate agent to a buyer or a seller, and real estate agents have a fiduciary duty to your clients. So when we're representing buyers and sellers, we have certain rights and duties to others. We have to remember the acronym OLD CAR, OLDCAR, and these are the responsibilities that we owe to our clients. Number one, obedience. Now, obedience is a very broad term, right? And these, again, are the fiduciary duties to a principal. These are the standard responsibilities that we owe the people that we are representing. We need to obey and promptly and efficiently all the lawful instructions of his principal. We do need to follow our client's instructions. So if they want us to do something, and as long as it's legal, yes, we need to do it. We cannot act illegally because our client asked us to. If our client says, hey, do not accept or consider any applicants that have blank last name or look like blank, we have to adhere towards fair housing laws, and we cannot follow that instruction. So if you got this crazy racist seller, well, you need to determine whether or not you still want to work with this person, or express to this client and say, hey, I can't break the law because you're asking me to. So we have to obey lawful instructions. We need obedience. We have to have loyalty. We have to put the principal's interests above our own interests. Yes, this is our livelihood. This is how we're receiving commissions. But we have to act on their behalf. We have to act on our client's behalf and look out for their best interest. We must disclose material facts to our client. If somebody died in the house, if something's not working, we have a fiduciary duty to express that to our clients and let that be known that something is happening. If we know that every day at 2:30 from 3 o'clock, you know that street gets jam-packed because of the school across the street, we have to express that to our clients. We have to basically ask ourselves, really, this is the easy way to figure this out. Could this information alter the client's decision? Like whatever situation or issue, maybe there's freeway noise. Maybe every night at 9:30, the Disneyland fireworks go off. Could that knowledge influence your client's decision and change their mind and help and make them change their mind? We have to disclose all material facts pertaining to the transaction to our clients. This is obedience, loyalty, disclosure, OLD. CAR stands for confidentiality. We have to keep our clients' personal information private, unless they tell us to express it. So if I'm selling Carla's home and she's selling it for 500,000, but Carla says, Ben, we'll take 450, if we can get closer to 500. And then I run over and I tell Bella, hey, Bella, my client will take 450, offer 450. Like, that is a breach of my fiduciary duty. I need to look out on their best behalf. And unless I'm told to share private information, I need to keep that stuff confidential between myself and my principal. I also need accountability. Accountability is another standard responsibility. No secret profits. It's a very competitive market right now. And if I got 10 offers on the table and 10 of you guys are making offers on my listing right now, but one of you slides me an extra $1,000 cash and says, hey, Ben, I'll give you $1,000 cash, accept my offer. Tell your seller to accept my offer. Like, that is a breach of my fiduciary duties because I have secret profits. I'm not telling. That's secret profits, compensation without their clients knowing. That is a big no-no. And then the last responsibility that I owe my principal is I need to have reasonable skill, care, and diligence. I need experience, education, market knowledge, and professionalism. Now, this is a very broad, loose responsibility. Would you guys say that a person that has had their real estate license for 20 years is better to work with versus somebody who just got their license yesterday? What would you guys say to that?
No.
I wouldn't agree, because what I've often found is people who've had their licenses for a long time might sell a home every 4 years. Like, they may have never done any deal. Just because you have your license, it does not mean that you have this utmost skill and care and diligence. The market is rapidly changing. I've seen this in 14 years where it's just people get left behind, and it's always new things, new laws, new things changing. And in order to stay current in business, we need to be active in this business. I often have agents who haven't done a deal in a couple of years. They come back and like, oh, so much has changed. Yeah. The problem with all of this is that you guys as licensees, once you guys pass your exam and get your license, you have the same responsibility as somebody who's been selling 100 homes a year. You passed the test, you passed a fancy test, and now you have the same responsibility to your principals to be experienced, have the education, and stay up to date. So R stands for reasonable skill, care, and diligence. I need you to know this acronym, OLD CAR. Obedience, loyalty, right here. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, material facts, confidentiality, accountability, don't take secret profits, and have reasonable skill, care, and diligence. Now, we do have, in addition to our duties that we owe our principal, a lot of the times we might be representing only the buyer, and there may be a seller and another agent. We still have duties to them as well, too. So to the other party of your transaction, these are the things that you owe that other party. You owe them disclosure of material facts. You owe them reasonable skill, care, and diligence. You owe them fair dealing, and you owe them good faith, to be honest during your transaction. I don't think a lot of this stuff is too crazy to ask for. This is all common sense stuff, but this is just the vocabulary of it. Fun stuff, a lot of stuff today. And I'm full of acronyms. Give me one acronym, Carla. What's one acronym from today?
Old car.
Perfect, give me another one.
Maria.
Perfect, give me one more.
Shoot, I'm drawing a blank on the third one.
Shoot is not another one. Give me one more. Well, give me one more acronym, everybody. What's another acronym that we talked about today? Old car. Pete,
Pete.
there you go. We got Pete, we got Maria, we got
Dust.
old car, and then we got one more, which is on my screen, which is dust, and D-U-S-T. And these are the 4 essential elements of value. So we're talking value. What are the elements? Demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability. So let's go demand, D for demand. Ask ourselves, does anybody want the property? the desire, the need, the ability to purchase. The demand in Huntington Beach versus, I may not disrespect anybody's city here. What's that one city? Hellendale. You guys know where Hellendale is?
Off the 14 somewhere.
I don't even know where the 14 is. Hellendale's by Victorville. It's like in the middle of nowhere. The demand, why are homes in Huntington Beach more expensive than Hellendale?
Demand.
Demand, yeah. No offense, Hellendale residents. You're in the middle of nowhere. There isn't much around you. Whereas Huntington Beach, downtown LA, like there's jobs, there's schools, there's so much more infrastructure out that way versus areas that are in the middle of nowhere. The demand is extremely important and it contributes to value. Higher demand, usually higher the prices. The value of toilet paper during COVID. For some reason, we thought we were going to run out of toilet paper. So the demand went up, like the value of that went up. Right now, the home values here in Southern California are on the rise because people still demand housing, but there is not a ton of inventory for sale right now. So that's causing it to increase. Let's talk about the utility. Can someone use this property? 3-bedroom or 1-bedroom? Now, think about casting a wider net. Do more people want a 3-bedroom or do more people want a 1-bedroom like studio? People want both, but the demand, the utility, can people use a 3-bedroom home more than a 1-bedroom? Yeah, absolutely. So that plays a factor into the value of a property. Demand and scarcity go hand in hand. Is there a lot of it? In short supply, the subject will usually become more expensive. Supply and demand, the scarcity of it. Right now, we have scarce inventory. We have low inventory. And we have high demand, which is causing pressure on prices. Even though interest rates are higher than they were 2-3 years ago, it does not matter. People still need housing. And then the last one is transferability. Can I sell it? Can I transfer ownership easily with a deed? And these all are attributes and elements that help determine value of a property. The demand, the utility, the scarcity, transferability. Question, Claudia. Oh, all good. Perfect. And these are the 4 essential elements. Another acronym: Pete, Maria, Old Car, Dust. These are all important acronyms. And they don't, and by all means, these, I didn't make up any of these acronyms. These are all acronyms that are taught through crash courses, real estate school for the last 30, 40, 50 years. These are all need to knows of your state exam. Let's put our appraiser hats on. Let's talk appraisal values. Now we can go down the rabbit hole of appraisals and how to do it and pull comps together. But what do we need to know? We need to know the methods. We need to know the methods that appraisers use to value property. Not every property is the same. You guys can all do the first one, which is what we call the comparison approach. In other languages, not other languages, but other, like in the book, handouts, and notes, you'll also see it recognized as the market data approach. And this is mainly used for houses, condos, and land. So right now, wherever you live, if you know what other homes are selling for in the area, what you're doing is you're comparing what your neighbor's home is selling, comparing it to yours. If your home is a lot nicer than the one that sold across the street and that one sold for $700,000, you're probably thinking, ooh, mine's nicer, mine will sell for more. You are doing a short form method of the comparison approach. And that's what that is. You're just comparing, and this is used for houses, condos, and land. The other approach is called the cost approach. This is also known as the replacement cost approach. Now, this one is used for new construction. This is used for unique custom homes. And this is used for like public buildings. And the reason they call this the cost approach is because this one is a lot more intricate. This is above what I would normally do, unless you're going to be an appraiser, like this is not something I would advise any of you guys. What the cost approach entails is a calculation. Number one, you have to calculate the land. What's the land worth? Number one. Number two, you have to calculate the cost to build. Like how much it costs to build a new structure on this piece of land. So you got to have some construction costs. Number three, you got to deduct depreciation. And then you do some mathematical equation to come up with what that property is worth based upon the circumstances. This cost approach appraisal is not cheap. This one costs a little bit more. This is also used in new construction. When it comes to new construction, you have a bunch of homes built in the middle of nowhere and they're just popping up brand new homes. Well, how is an appraiser supposed to pull comps if there are no homes nearby that have closed? They have to use the cost approach. They have to figure out how much is the cost to build, what's the cost of the land, and then generate their number. The last one, the third approach is the capitalization approach, also known as the income approach. This appraisal is mainly focusing on apartment buildings, warehouses, retail. This is income focused. What's the money generated off this? Cap approach, income approach. 3 types of approaches: comparison, cost, cap approach. And this little chart that I made here is like your basic overview and knowing what does what, which kind of appraisal method would you use for whatever the situation is. Most of the time, we're going to use the comparison approach. So like I said, comparison approach, that's for houses, condos, vacant land too. Commonly used by homeowners and nosy neighbors. You guys will learn nosy neighbors. You guys are all probably nosy neighbors. When you see an open house, you pop in just to see what they remodeling, what their house look like. But when you do open houses, there's always the nosy neighbors. The cost approach, again, calculate it, depreciation, value of the land. That's the 10,000 feet view of the cost approach. And then the cap approach, also known as the income approach, we're calculating income. We're calculating businesses, warehouses, apartment buildings. That's what we're doing on that approach. Let's talk fair housing laws. California state fate housing law. Oops, what'd I do? Sorry, I will fix my spelling errors. So let's talk California state fair housing laws. Let's talk federal laws. These are super important. These also fall in the category of fiduciary duties. So let's first start off with California state fair housing laws. We need to know what the Unruh Civil Rights Act is. The Unruh Civil Rights Act, no discrimination allowed in business based upon sex, race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, disability, genetic information, sexual orientation, marital status, citizenship. We knew this. Am I correct? Perfect. We all knew this one. Does it happen today? Does discrimination happen today? That wasn't a trick question. You guys know it does.
Yes.
Yeah, sadly it does. But this is the act, the rights that we're governed by, that we need to understand that it is not correct to do in business and when we are representing others. We need to know the Rumford Act. The Rumford Act is also known as the Fair Employment and Housing Act. This deals specifically with rentals, sales, financing, and it provides penalties for violations. These go hand in hand. The last one is the Holden Act. Holden Act, you know, when I see Holden Act, I see the H, and the H reminds me of the Housing Financial Discrimination Act. This one has to deal with lending. This one forbids lenders from what we call redlining. And redlining, it's denying loans or varying terms based on a property location. This redlining was, when I started teaching this class, I really didn't know redlining. I knew what the term said, but I didn't realize, in the 50s and the 60s too, like how this occurred throughout Southern California, through the United States. And this still occurs today. This is lenders pushing different terms for certain areas, blue collar areas, like financial areas. This is causing varying their terms just because of the zip code, just because of the city, just because of the reputation that this has, because of the race. It's, just Google redlining in YouTube and you'll get a gazillion documentaries about it to learn more about redlining. But what redlining, denying loans or varying terms based upon the property's location, this one has to deal with lending. The Federal Civil Rights Act of 1968 put a star, circle, heart around this one. Monumental case, Jones versus Mayer. You will likely get a question that asks you, what's the monumental case in 1968? And it'll give you a bunch of different cases. Jones versus Mayer. Jones versus John Mayer. It's not really John Mayer, but Jones versus Mayer. And this prohibits discrimination in sale, rental, and financing dwellings and other housing-related transactions. And what does it cover? Any discrimination that's not in the two acts, that's not in the UNRU or the Fair Employment and Housing, did not present. There are no restrictions to this. It makes it illegal for real estate licensees to engage in discriminatory practices regarding any instructions the agent may have received from the seller. You can't break the law because the seller told you not to accept offers from this race. The real estate boards are part of this. All the real estate offices and subdivision models must have a fair housing poster. And then gender was a protected class added in 1974. Big case, 1968. Two more, blockbusting and panic peddling. Blockbusting is the practice of illegally frightening homeowners by telling them that people who are members of a particular race, religion, or national origin are moving into their neighborhood. Blockbusting, panic peddling, knocking on someone's door or telling people, hey, you need to sell because so-and-so is moving in. And what happens is when they move in, the values go down. Just Google blockbusting, panic peddling in YouTube, and a ton of documentaries will pop up. The other one is racial steering. Racial, obviously, it has to deal with race, and steering, like you're driving a car, like you're steering them in a direction. This one here.
Directions to where?
Oh my God, Siri's listening to my conversations now. Racial steering, and you're steering them based upon their race. So if you guys look at me, what neighborhood would you want me to move into? What neighborhood do you think I want to move into?
One moment. I'm not sure I understand.
Compton.
Where?
Compton.
Fountain?
Compton.
Oh, Compton. You want me to move to Compton?
Yes.
Yeah. You're racially steering me into Compton? No, okay. All right. We don't racially steer anybody into any areas. So if you look at somebody and you're like, oh, hey, you are this race, and oh, you probably want to move to blank areas. And we all know what areas have more of a predominant race than others, but it's when we assume that they want to move there is when we cross that line. Now, if that client expresses to you and says, I want to live in a neighborhood where the corn man goes through. Do you guys know what neighborhoods the corn man goes through? I love it. No one wants to answer.
Yeah.
What
San
kind of
Pedro.
neighborhood?
I was gonna say San Pedro. I used
Yeah,
to
I
have
was gonna say
it.
some people too.
Yeah, predominantly Hispanic areas have the corn man going through. That was a real life story. A client told me that. I'm like, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. I got you covered. And then we talked about different cities. She gave me a couple cities, but racial steering is when you assume, and then the client feels like you're racially steering them is when you're going to get in trouble. So panic peddling, racial steering, 1968, Jones versus Mayer, like all the discrimination laws, you need to know them. And let's finish up on encumbrances. Carla, when was the last time that you used the word encumbrance in your everyday language?
Never, ever.
Never. It's like a weird word, encumbrance. something it's like a shadow. It's like a cloud. It's like something. It's like baggage. There you go. That's a better one. Encumbrance is not a good thing. It's not an awful thing. It's a very common thing, but it's really not. It's a burden. It's baggage. It's a restriction. It's a constraint. If you have a mortgage loan on your property, you have an encumbrance. That's what it is. If you have a mortgage against your property, if you couldn't pay your income taxes, so the IRS attached a lien to your property, the IRS now has an interest in your real property, you have an encumbrance. If the city has an easement, if the city has the right to your property to pass through for whatever reason, you have an encumbrance. If there's a driveway easement, if someone else has to drive on your driveway to get to their property, you have an encumbrance. So it's not a bad thing. Just know it's not like the best thing. So a form of an encumbrance is a money lien. Yeah, you got a mortgage? Cool, you got an encumbrance. Not a big deal. There are general and there are specific encumbrances. There's a judgment lien. Tax liens are general and they're connected to a person. You don't pay your income taxes, they're going to find what property you own and they're going to collect whenever you sell that property. A specific lien are against one property, like a mechanic's lien. Somebody comes up, contractor files, didn't get paid on the work that they did. They file a lien against your property. That lien, also known as an encumbrance. They filed an encumbrance against your property. The IRS filed an encumbrance against you and want to collect. And these liens can be voluntary or involuntary. If you volunteer to get a mortgage to buy a property, that's you volunteered for that. If the IRS puts a lien against your property because you didn't pay the taxes, you didn't really want them to put the lien on there. So that's involuntary. A blanket lien, think about a blanket. It's bigger, it covers. And that's when a lien is placed on more than one property. You own 5 homes, you had a judgment against you for $10 million. The judge can put a blanket lien, a blanket encumbrance against all the properties that you own. And then a tax lien, property taxes, any unpaid property taxes can be involuntary, and those could be an encumbrance on the property that you own. So those are the money-related stuff. Those are the money-related encumbrances onto a property. Let's talk about some non-money. These are non-money encumbrances, also known as easements. Easement is probably a little bit more common language than encumbrances, but an easement is the right to use another person's land for a specific limited purpose use, or it's a specific limited purpose. If you guys have a telephone pole in your backyard, electrical pole, like if it's in your land, you have an easement. Southern California Edison, Anaheim Public Utilities, if they need to work on their pole, like they have the right to access your property and work on it. If the gas company has an easement on all of your guys' properties if you have gas. Because if you have a gas leak and they need to fix the gas line, well, and it's underground, they have the right to it. The community I live in here in Anaheim, all the property owners, we all have a 3 1/4 foot easement on everybody's property. And what I have here at the bottom is the language directly from our title reports. Just to give you an example, so like on the north side of my house, my electrical panel and my gas meter is over there. But my gas meter and my electrical panel, I have to actually walk onto my neighbor's property to get to that. If I were to paint my house, I would have to step onto my neighbor's property to paint on their to paint my property. An easement is a right to someone else's property. Now, can I go to my neighbor's yard and start building? Can I start planting trees, parking my car? No, I just have a limited right to someone else's property. Just as like my neighbor to the south, they have limited right to get up on my property to get to their gas meter and to get to their electrical panel. Another example of an easement, this is called an easement apartment. Let's imagine you're looking, this is the street, and you have three houses, house number 1, house number 2, and house number 3, or 1, 2, and 3. There you go. I see these in Whittier, La Habra. I've only seen these in Whittier and La Habra, but I've also seen it in Orange too. But this is what we call an easement a permit. This is the right to use another person's land for a specific limited purpose. So let's just imagine that these property lines are drawn like this. Right? You're driving on the street, and let's say you own at lot number 3. Let's say you own this house. A driveway easement is like this. I have to drive onto lot number 2's driveway to get to my property. And it goes the same for lot number 1. Lot number 1 can't just jump to their property. They have to cross lot number 2 to get to lot number 1. So if this person right here is having a giant party and they're like, I'm going to block off all the streets. Well, though it is their land, lot number 1 and lot number 3 have to be able to get to their property, and it can't be blocked. Just because everybody drives over your land does not mean that you can block the street so that these individuals can't get to their home. Why is the property lines drawn like this? I don't know. Don't really truly know. Why don't they change it? But there probably is a reason why they can't. Genesis, you don't mind. You have a telephone pole, or do you have a driveway easement? I'm curious now.
We
Anyways.
have a telephone pole.
Okay, you got telephone poles? Yeah. So like, if we pulled up the property profile on your, we pulled up the preliminary title report for your property, I guarantee you there's going to be a clause in there that states like the utility company has an easement on your land. So this is an easement of permit. This is a driveway easement. That's the right to use someone else's land for a non-possessory interest. Utility companies like an easement in gross. There is also something called an easement by necessity. You got 4 plots of land, A, B, C, and D. If you notice that B is landlocked right in the middle there, you got mountains over here. You can't get to lot B without crossing C, D, or A. That's an easement by necessity. An easement by prescription is a continuous and notorious use of another property. The best example on this one is in the book. That's just, crossing someone's land to get to your land. Like, that's like, you have to be using it for years in order for that to happen. There's a question in the chat. Can lot 3's guest park on lot 2? Lot 2's line for one night? Well, technically you would need permission from lot 2 in order for that to happen, because you are essentially parking your vehicle on someone else's land. That's like me. No, that's a bad example. But yeah, can you? Yeah, with permission of the property owner, you could. That would be like me parking in my neighbor's yard. No, that's a bad example. So can lot 3's guest park on lot 2 line? Yeah, with permission. Even if it's for one night, forever, doesn't really matter. And then the last one that we're going to finish up on here is encroachment. This is intrusion on a person's territory or rights. This is where a structure or improvement on the property extends onto or over another property without proper legal authorization. This is why I feel like you're building, you want to make sure that you are building on your property lines, because if you don't, you would be encroaching on your neighbors. This is my neighbor's, this is real life picture. This is my neighbor's house. This is where his property line ends. This is a tree. This is my eucalyptus tree. And if we go straight up, you can see that my tree is encroaching on my neighbor's property. Now, if my neighbor's property was encroaching onto my land with a bunch of avocados and fruits, I would not have a problem. But if my neighbor has an issue with the tree dropping tree sap on his truck, like that's kind of my responsibility to take care of because I am encroaching on his land. That is encroachment. Encroachment, encumbrance, easement. Triple E's. Encroachment, easement, encumbrance. Know the definition of those three. And thank you for attending Henry Schools on May 6th, 1031. I appreciate you guys. Stick around if you guys have any additional questions. Thank you guys. We will catch you guys next week. I will send you the recording of today on Monday of next week. And stick around if you guys have any additional questions. But hope you found that helpful. Hope you remembered all the acronyms. Pete, Old Car, Maria, Dust. And I think that was it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Have a good one. See you later. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everybody.